So, anyways, some of the stuff I want to cover here is, of course, what is Armageddon and some of the aspects about it, and then how it fits in with the feasts. And as Brother Randy has pointed out, the feasts appear to be sequential in their nature, and not only in their appointed times, but in their outworkings. The sequential nature of the feast is there. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. John's having issues hearing me. You can't read lips, my lips. Sorry, John. This is the only one and only place, of course, Armageddon is found in the Bible. And so before I talk about what Armageddon is, and I understand there's different viewpoints on this, and we can go to bat later if you need to. But before I talk about what Armageddon is, let's talk about what it isn't, because one of the very popular expositions today is that Armageddon means Mount Megiddo in Hebrew. There's Har and Megadon, Magadon, whatever. This is one interpretation that's given, but there's some problems here with this interpretation, and one is that there's just a little hill there, and I remember seeing pictures, this older pictures. Right now they're doing some excavations on top, and they found a Canaanite village up there, and so they're digging up the remains and finding old weapons and different things like that the Canaanites used. But there's the one of the problems is that this is the Mount of Megiddo, right? And what we're told is there's going to be multitudes of Gog, right? He's going to come as a cloud to cover the land. And how are you going to fit all the destroyed Gogian army on that little teeny rock thing, right? It's just not enough. It's not big enough. That's one problem with this interpretation. It's not big enough. It's not enough space. You need more. You need more area. And not only that, all the places that describe Armageddon, we'll see, talks about a valley, not talking about a mountain. So we'll get into that. But another problem is it says very specifically in the previous, very specifically, it says in the Hebrew tongue, it's called Armageddon. So in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon, it doesn't fit. Megiddo is not Hebrew. Hebrew scholars have tried to figure out what would it mean if it was Hebrew. Nobody could figure it out. They say, well, Gadad means to cut, but what's Megad? And then what's the N? How did the N get on the end? And nobody knows. And so the New Oxford Annotated Bible under names mentions this. It says that it refers to it as an ancient Canaanite name. So I wasn't around then, but that's kind of what some of the scholars think, and it seems plausible. Some of the names of the places that got conquered didn't get changed. Some of them did. Anyways, looking further into dissecting a little bit of the language here, we'll see that Megiddo, the place that's the valley up north where they do the agriculture, that little hill, that's in northern Israel, far away from Jerusalem. Anyways, Megiddo, the word, the name, the place name did not have an N sound on the end. So Armageddon definitely has an N sound on the end. Megiddo does not, and the Hebrew N sound is that one there. That's the Nun Safit, ending N sound, basically. And then as we see, there's only one single instance of Megiddon, where Megiddo is spelled with an N on the end. There's only one single instance in the Masoretic text, and that's in Zechariah 12. And the Masoretic text was translated, that one was 7th to 9th century AD. Different sections were translated at different times. So how did it get there? We don't know. Everywhere else where Megiddo is used, there's no N on the end. And then there's some Septuagint copies that have Megiddo, but and the Septuagint was from before the time of Christ, but the oldest copies that we have were from around the 4th century AD. So how did that N get there? If it was a Canaanite name, it didn't have N. And furthermore, the Egyptian records, the Egyptians pronounced it Makdah, and again, no N sound on the end. We don't know how the N sound got there. The DSS, the Dead Sea Scrolls, comes and saves the day. These are the ones that they found buried in old caves. And the oldest copies of those were 1 or 2 centuries before Christ. So we know those are the oldest things that we have of originals, well, close to originals we could get. In the Hebrew there for Zechariah 12:11. As you can see here, it ends with the Vav. That's the Vav. It says a Mem, Gimel, Dalet, whatever, and Vav. The Vav here has an O sound, Megiddo. And there's an N in the Masoretic text for this verse, just this one place, is the only place it is. And the Dead Sea Scrolls for the same verse does not have the N sound. So the question is, did it get added sometime later? I think it's safe to conclude pretty much that that somebody saw the way something was spelled in the Revelation. Yeah, when it depends on whatever you think that was written, 95 AD, say a lot of people. Anyways, it looks like to me like somebody wanted that to fit somewhere. And yeah, we're going to get into that. So I think we could conclude that Megiddo is not a very good interpretation for Armageddon in this one. So what is it? And John Thomas told us this in Eureka. And if you're wanting to know, it's Eureka, Volume 5, Chapter 16, Part 4. He points out it has to be in the Hebrew tongue. Says that right there. That's the translation key in the Revelation. And he gives the Hebrew words, arama, which means sheaves or a heap of sheaves, gai, which means a valley, and din, which means judgment or threshing. So we have a heap of sheaves in a valley of judgment. And just to verify that, there's all these passages in the Old Testament that have allusions to this. And we know that things in Revelation are pointing to the Old Testament. Sometimes they're pointing to things that Jesus said. To look, we can go back and find the keys and help us interpret these things. And so we have in Micah 4 here a passage about the nations being gathered as sheaves to be threshed, and arise and thresh. That's arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion. In Joel 3, all the nations are gathered, multitudes gathered to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means God's judgment. And it also mentions the valley of decision there, which means it's the same word as threshing. And it puts the words put in the sickle for the harvest is ripe. So you see, I think it's really difficult to miss the allusion, the allusion that's going on in these passages. So basically, God is lining up the nations. Well, they're seen as, it says, they know not the counsel of the Lord. He shall gather them as sheaves to the floor. So that is sort of their destiny after they're used for judging Israel. Their destiny is themselves to be judged. And I threw this chart together here because it was helpful. I think you'll see here that these passages all basically speak about the same thing. It's hard to miss the similarities here. And so I call these the Armageddon passages. And I know that there's a lot of people that will try to say, well, Ezekiel's not the same thing as Zechariah 14. It's talking about two different times. And I don't see that as, I see a completely harmonious theme that's running through these passages. And they're both obviously very last day passages, and that's obvious. And so anyways, I think that kind of covers the what and the where of what Armageddon is and where it is. Note where it is. It is not in Megiddo, right? This threshing takes place in Jerusalem. And there's other common threads too, but there's not time to probably go through all of them. And back to this passage again. We see the two events. And by the way, Jason Hensley's grandfather, John Hensley, according to my dad, used to say, people are asking him, when is Jesus going to come back? You know, where does it say where Jesus is going to come back? Well, you shouldn't have to ask where it says where Jesus is coming back, because it says he's coming back right here. And otherwise you'd have to ask, well, why is this passage, why is that verse wedged in between here and here, right? It seems it's a natural time sequence here. So here we have Armageddon, and we have two events that happened before it. One being the spirits like frogs, and the other being, behold, I come as a thief, or what I would take to mean unannounced. Unannounced. So he'll come as a thief, and it'll be a surprise to those who are not watching, not expecting, and not ready. What these frog-like spirits do, what their effect is, right? Their effect is that they go forth to the kings of the earth and gather them to the battle of God Almighty. Okay? That's what they do. And then we look around today and we ask, what is driving the nations against Israel today? And it's the Palestinian issue, basically. If you can look at videos from a group called UN Watch, and they're basically meaning they're kind of a watchdog for what the UN is doing. And they'll play videos of some of the meetings going on in the United Nations Council of Human Rights. And basically all they do is all day long is try to levy false accusations against Israel, claiming that Israel is doing all these bad things that Israel isn't actually doing. So we have, by the way, it's sort of a parasitic organization that runs this. I think what they've basically done is taken a whole lot of poor Arabs, brainwashed them to believe that the land belongs to them, and abuse them and mistreat them and torture them if they contest with them. What they give them for education is all about jihad and not really an education at all. So, of course, Israel always gets the blame. Now, when we give money to Amnesty International, a lot of the money goes to the Palestinian Authority, which was basically set up by the KGB. We'll get into that. We need to get with boatloads of evidence for that. What do they do with their money that they get? Well, they build themselves big mansions for one thing, but they don't seem to spend a lot of it on schools and hospitals. They use it to fund martyrdom, to murder Jews. So if some Palestinian man goes and blows himself up and kills a bunch of Jews in Israel, they use that money to pay for keep to support his family. So for some people, they're so poor, there's real incentive to just actually go out and do just that. And of course, they go to the UN and perpetuate the narrative that Israel perpetrates humanitarian crimes. So basically, what happens is they're perpetrating humanitarian crimes and blaming it on Israel. And so that's kind of the situation that's going on now. And if you think about it, there's a whole parallel here with what Israel is going through and what Christ went through. And I can go through several aspects of that, but this is just one of them where Christ, you remember, they claimed that he was illegitimate. And we know who our Father is, and then they basically lied about what he did. Like they basically falsely accused him, and before they nailed him to the cross, and it says they parted his garments, and Zechariah 14 tells us that in Israel or Jerusalem, it says that what is it? It's be divided in the midst. The spoil will be divided in the midst of thee. So you could go on down the line, and find several different parallels like this, where it seems like Christ foreshadowed in certain ways what Israel is going to be suffering in the Armageddon. And other things they do, especially running false stories, basically, I guess fake news, whatever you call it, about Israel and the IDF and the Israel police. And here's an example. There's thousands of pictures like this on the internet, where this one was in 2000. There was a Jewish American teenager who was a student. He went to Jerusalem. He wandered into an Arab place and got beaten to within inches of his life. He ran as fast as he could to a border police, who then warded off the Arab attackers and saved his life by calling an ambulance. And then they relabel the photo an Israeli policeman and a Palestinian on the Temple Mount. Well, he's not a Palestinian, he's a Jew who was just beaten up by Palestinians. But it makes you look at the picture and you think that this Israeli policeman has been beaten up on these poor Arabs, and your heart goes out, and you start giving money to Amnesty International, and that's the whole kind of con game that's going on. And this particular one actually was printed in the New York Times. We later retracted it, but the damage was done. But there's thousands of examples like this. I've seen some with it'll show a picture of some poor little Palestinian boy was, he was blown up by Israeli bombs or something, and then you find out the real story. What behind the picture was, it was a Syrian kid that was blown up by cluster bombs dropped by Russia or someplace. Right? So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. So the effect of what is going to drive the nations against Israel is this whole Palestinian issue. But Revelation tells us that it's the three frog-like spirits. And John Thomas told us that those three frog-like spirits were equality, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So I'll just say that I struggled for years trying to figure this out. What does the frog-like spirits have to do with Palestinians? Is a Palestinian Authority, how is that related to frogs? And I started studying Palestinian frogs and the River Nile and all the different things you could think of. And I could, that's why I had the missing puzzle piece or the missing link there. I was just like, what is the connection here? I don't understand, because here's what's going on in the real world, and here's what Revelation is saying. And now I'm going, was John Thomas wrong? about this, because if you think about the Palestinian Authority, you know, and these here characteristics these have to do with democracy, right? This all these freedoms and everything. And the Palestinian Authority has nothing to do with democracy. The guy that was a boss, he hasn't been. I think some people laugh that he's serving like the 20th year of his four-year term or something. There's basically no elections there at all. It's basically sort of a little mini dictatorship. So there's the Palestinian Authority has nothing to do whatsoever with democracy. So what's the connection here? It actually denies these rights to its citizens. So this was a hard one for me, and luckily there's brother Pete Owen who put out an excellent video, and I can give anybody the YouTube link later. But this really connected the dots for me. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, if you go to the United Nations' website, and you know, this is the UNHRC, United Nations Human Rights Council, is the group that's continually pounding Israel. In fact, I think they said like 90% of all of their resolutions against, you know, human rights violators were against Israel. Well, it's sort of a farce because Israel is such a small country and doesn't, and it's sort of like hyper focused on Israel. Israel's the problem. And you look at the players in these videos of who's condemning Israel, and it's Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, and so these are experts, of course, in human rights, right? So so this particular, what's interesting here is the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is the guiding light document of the United Nations, and they've taken this language of the French Declaration of the right. I think it's the French Declaration of the Right of Humans or Man or something. They've basically taken that and lifted it and put it directly into their document. And on their website, they don't have these words in the UDHR, but on their website, they basically say that that's the driving spirit of their human rights policy, or these three things. Now, to me, this big light bulb came on. I was just so grateful, okay, that finally there's a connection. I was looking for a connection. I'm like, I know there's a connection. Where is it? And there it is. And, you know, to me, I've told people this, and there's some people that go, yeah, well, I'm not really a big advocate of continuous historic interpretation anyways. Or, you know, like there's some people that just don't get it. That they're not, and you ask these people, okay, well, what do you think that the three frog-like spirits are? Oh, I don't know. Well, if you don't have a better answer than this, then why are you saying this one's not a good interpretation? You know, I don't get it. But anyways, this, to me, it was just, I was just grateful to be able to go back a couple slides here. To be able to look at Revelation, to be able to look at this book, a lot of it, let's face it, is kind of like mysterious, right? But to be able to look in here and go, I can see exactly where we are. I can see we're right here. This has been going on for actually since about the 50s or 60s, 60s or 70s. With the United Nations being used as a propaganda tool against Israel has been going on for decades, and this has been going on now, and we're right between verse 14 and 15, right here. That's where we're at, and no other generation has seen this because they look at this, they didn't understand because it didn't exist until the 20th century. What this phenomenon here. it would have been really hard to figure out what that verse meant back before it came to into existence. So that's just wanted to say that's something that was very, very helpful for me. How much time? Okay, good. We'll ask, how do the feasts tie into all this? And I think as Randy pointed out, it looks like these feasts and their outworkings are in some sort of a sequential order. And by the way, I don't take any credit for this drawing. It's borrowed from the internet. And so if there's anything wrong on it, I don't take credit for that either. But it's what I liked about it, this drawing, was that it separates the spring and fall feast. It's really easy to see and to read. And the one there's some things missing, like Pentecost should say weeks in parentheses, because the Pentecost is after the 7 sevens, right? The 7 weeks. You know, the Hebrew word for week is basically the same as their word for sevens. So basically, when they say 1 week, they mean 1 7. But 7 sevens, and then the next day is the day of Pentecost. Pentecost meaning 50 or something, right? Pente.
50. Can you explain Pentecost really quick?
Yeah. Well,
Briefly.
Oh, I'm going to get more into it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, a little bit more. Because what I want to do is I'm trying to show kind of that we're kind of between here and here. I know that regathering of Israel is considered an early trumpet by some, and I agree. And when I read all of it prophecy and I see the trumpet and the gathering of the elect, I don't think of that as Christ gathering the saints, at the last trump. I think of that as Israel regathering, because he's quoting a verse from Isaiah. Ask me later and I can dig that up. Is it 61? I'm not so sure. I could find it out, but I thought it was 20 here. But yeah, just here we can see the feasts. They're divided, and generally the spring feasts are associated with Christ's first coming, and the fall stuff after his second coming. So that's so generally speaking, I think there's variations on this theme, but most people kind of generally hold to that concept. So and I actually like to talk more on this later, but I think in my mind, some of these are kind of more like periods than just a single event. Like I know there was the day of Pentecost, but the Holy Spirit gifts there came to an end at some point. They're miraculous ones. I mean, nobody's here claiming that they can speak in tongues and have everybody understand what they're saying all over the world, or those kind of things. So it's called the earnest of our inheritance, or the foretaste of our inheritance, or in elsewhere the age to come. It's called the powers of the age to come. So my thought is that this is just sort of a starting point for what's called the actual. We'll talk about this in a minute. So let's focus on the time where we think we're at, though, Pentecost. And by the way, this is just sort of this here is just sort of an observation, and I don't claim that I made this observation myself, but I read a lot of stuff, and this makes a lot of sense to me. This I found I've highly refined this material from a paper by Jim Dillingham, something called like occupational training for immortal priesthood, vocational training for the immortal priesthood, right? And so he points out that there are three, and we discussed these three harvest feasts, right? And he points out that the things that you find in the first harvest feast could only relate to Christ. In particular, the unleavened, the sacrifices there were of unleavened, and the waving of the barley sheaf, single sheaf. And that, by the way, I think on the third day, which reflective of his resurrection. And of course, Christ being the first fruits of them that slept, nails down that he is the first fruits, right? He's the first fruits. It's this. So I think that he makes a very strong argument that the first fruits is something related strongly to Christ specifically. Now I'm going to say that he argues fairly strongly that these three feasts of this appointed times, of these 7 appointed times, 3 of them were feasts, were harvest feasts, and that they represent the 3 harvests of God. So the first harvest being Christ, the first fruits, and then the other 2, the second one being the premillennial, the first resurrection, and the third one being the post-millennial resurrection after the Sabbath or the 7th millennium. So as for the weeks, literally, of course, we say it means 7s. The wheat harvest. So this is the day of Pentecost. This is the Feast of Weeks. So 7 sevens, they counted 7 sevens, and then another on the next day they had the day of Pentecost, which was they called in the Old Testament under the original law is called the weeks. And they harvested the wheat. And the wave offering was 2 loaves. 2 loaves of leavened bread. 2 loaves of leavened bread, representing the Jews and the Gentiles, is what kind of one of the more common thoughts here is. It could be wrong, but it seems good. So right now we'll just keep it there as a placeholder. But it makes sense. I like the way it fits together. What's interesting is here, that wheat is akin to barley more than any of the other harvest foods, right? So you think about what's going on in this whole observed periods, right, is an agricultural year, basically. We have the start of the agricultural year, and then at the end of the agricultural year. The Feast of Tabernacles is the 3rd harvest feast. It's never called first fruits, and so it's thought to represent the second resurrection. So whether you buy that or not, that's fine. It's a slightly different, I think, interpretation than Randy presented. It might be compatible, it might not, I don't know, but you can work out all the details. And if I'm wrong, send me an email. But it's kind of interesting how it all fits together. I don't think it conflicts. I think it's just 2 different aspects of the same things, and they might be completely compatible. So moving on. We already looked at the Feast of Weeks. As this is just to reiterate again that the word weeks in Hebrew means 7s, and it just so happens that in Revelation, you see it's full of 7s, and the periods, generally speaking, where the 7s occur, the 7 trumpet, the 7 vials, the 7. This generally is overlaid with the saints from the time of the Revelation to the destruction of Babylon, or just slightly before that maybe. So it's sort of like you have like a a parallel between the destruction of Babylon and the destruction of Jericho, of course. So you have a lot of sevens in Revelation, and it seems to cover about the same time period approximately. And it could be a coincidence, or it could be, either way, it's something to consider. Anyways, I just like this graphic so much. Threw it in there. Break up the monotony. And this was sent to me by Brother Rowan Kitchen. So thanks to him, if you're listening. So after the Feast of Weeks, this is the first spring feast, the trumpets, right? Randy brought up there's two different kinds of trumpets, and here's a little bit more detail on them. And it turns out they both symbolize redemption, and I also don't think that that's a coincidence either. But the difference being, I think the trumpets that were the ones made out of silver were blown by the priests, and the ones blown, the shofar, the ram's horn, was blown by the people. Anybody could blow a ram's horn, I guess, apparently. And that starts showing up around the Psalms, where they start talking about blowing the ram's horn, although it shows up earlier. But I mean, as far as the Jubilee and people blowing the ram's horn, I think that first shows up around the time of David. I think most people, I would take for granted that most people would understand that, or be of the same understanding. The ram caught in the thicket, it represented Christ. Trumpets. And so I went through and got some list of the purposes found in Scripture that they used trumpets when trumpets came into. And all of these, except the first two, of course, have to do with the appointed times, and the rest were kind of somewhat appointed times too. But these are to kind of give you a flavor of some of the things that trumpets were used. Oh, and Randy added one to this morning. Thank you, Randy. Weddings, right? Trumpet, we blow trumpet on the wedding. So I didn't have that here. So I'm gonna have to add that someday to my slides here, I guess, because I missed that one. But I think that what's interesting here is to consider that all of these events will be occurring after Christ returns. All of them. And that's probably not a coincidence at all. And so I would venture to say that the Feast of Trumpets represents a time, or a very small time period perhaps, when Christ returns and these things start to happen. We mentioned that the same day that when he expired on the cross, they were killing the sacrificial lambs. He was raised from the dead the same day when they were going to wave the sheaf offering. And so one might almost expect the resurrection of the dead, or the last trump. One might almost expect that could coincide with the Feast of Trumpets. And I'm sure there's other people that would have different opinions on this, but it seems plausible. And so honestly, I have to say that earlier this week, I thought I might get out of doing this presentation. But here I am. So if this is right, then we got another year to whatever we need to do. I don't know. Everybody's different, right? Everybody's got different things going on. Honestly, yeah, I was sure that maybe I'll get out of there because 2021 it's not a Jubilee year, but I don't know, And actually, one of the rabbis that I looked up, one of the main Jewish sites, said they lost track of the Jubilee years. I know they have one where they say this is the Jubilee year every so often, but the really educated rabbis say they lost track of it a long time ago. But nobody's keeping track anymore, really. there's different opinions about which one. There's different ideas of what years are Jubilee years. There's not a consensus anyways. So what lessons can be extracted from all of this is, so the Jews consider this Rosh Hashanah period and leading up to the Day of Atonement, which I think if we said the first day of the 7th month, I think you said it was a few days ago or something, and then is it on the 10th day or something? They have the Day of Atonement. So that period is a period of reflection, a deep reflection, and it's that day actually starts this little period where the Jews work on reflecting on their own lives and their relationship with God, and returning to God, and turning or returning to God. And so certainly we would see some lesson here. We reflect, of course, in our lives and our relationships with God. Any time is a good time, but especially the appointed times would be definitely a good time to be reflecting. It's a time of turning, which indicates sort of a repentance, a change in the way we think. There's some parallel with the resurrection. There was a famous rabbi, Maimonides, probably the most famous rabbi that ever lived, to the Jews. He mentions that when they blow the trumpets all day long on the Day of Trumpets. They're not supposed to do any work. All they're supposed to do is be blowing trumpets. That's their New Year's Day, or whatever they call it. The 7th month, first day. They blow the trumpets, he says, to awaken the people from their slumber, to prepare for the solemn humiliation of the Day of Atonement. So obviously, I read that and I thought, awaking from your slumber, who doesn't see sort of the cameo with the resurrection there a little bit? They read Hosea 14, which mentions the word that can be translated turning away, returning, and there's different shades of that meaning, but it's basically a time to repent. So this time that we're in right now, the observant Jews are having their deep reflection period. And last but not least, I want to say that this is probably a good thing to say for all the people who are sitting on the fence about baptism too, and not quite sure if they're ready to commit. And even for us who are baptized, that the study of the feasts reinforces that we want to be in that first resurrection. It says right in Revelation, right? Those who are the first resurrection are described as blessed and holy, right? We would hope if Jesus comes and in the first resurrection, that first harvest, or second harvest, I guess, if not the last harvest anyway. We would want to be in on that harvest. We don't want to be waiting around, sitting on the fence, and then miss that opportunity. There's a book, by Sully about the Ezekiel's temple. There's people that have said no, he's wrong. And then there was another book. I'm not sure if it's available in the bookstores. I have a copy of it, but it's like, nope, Sully was right, and it explains every little detail that all of the objections to Sully's viewpoints are answered one after another. And his viewpoint was that basically those in the first resurrection act as priests, and they're immortal priests, and they serve God in his temple. And that the Levites will be brought back, the priesthood, to serve the people, and that by that we would be in an elevated priesthood. And I think that's what God's will was from the beginning for the nation of Israel, to be a nation of kingly priests, or kings and priests, however you want to translate that. And so I think it goes without saying that if somebody was not sure they want to be baptized or not really serious, but maybe the world's kind of attractive or whatever, any kind of thing like that, it's something to very seriously consider. Yeah, and so here we can see basically, again, John Thomas's interpretations are validated, and his continuous historic framework of the revelation is solid. My time is up. I got a few more things I could talk about to fill in the time, but we're out of time. So, any questions?
Could I add for the general comment that all of these John Thomas writings are on PDF files on the Christadelphian Vault website. If you're not